All is quiet here, on the edge of the outer drift, the vast and largely unexplored sector on the precipice of humanity's interstellar expansion. This is as far as we've got so far. Into the Forge cluster, our refuge and new home in the dark between the stars. All is quiet indeed until the sudden sound of a magnetic pulse interrupts the stillness of the void. It is an artificial sound, the voice of advanced technology, roaring briefly and just as suddenly falling silent once more. Not much has changed once the mute serenity of the vacuum settles back in, except one minor thing. A small speck in the vastness of space, this new arrival finds itself adrift among the debris of an asteroid field hurtling through the lonely emptiness. The newcomer drifting aimlessly through the unending darkness is a spaceship, and small only by comparison on a cosmic scale. In fact, as far as spaceships go, it is a specimen of monumental proportions and thus aptly named, as the scorched and barely legible script stenciled across its bow proclaims it to be the Titan. Hello friends, Anderson here, welcome to Forge Rats. Episode 1, Titan. Now before we launch into the action, a bit of overhead housekeeping since this is the very first actual play episode. What actually is this? This is a solo RPG actual play podcast of the game Ironsworn Starforged. The podcast is an audio format, and while it is out on YouTube on its own dedicated channel, it is also up on Podbean, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. And with that comes the thing I'm sure you've heard a million times before, but rating, commenting, liking, and subscribing really helps push visibility of the show, especially since it's very new, so thanks for doing that. As far as Starforged goes, it has been released digitally recently, so it is available on DriveThruRPG. And all of that, including my more visually focused actual play YouTube channel, Kill 10 Reds RPG, are available in the episode notes and the description. As far as upload frequency goes, this will be at least every other week, more if I can manage, definitely the occasional bonus episode, as we also still need to build some factions going forward. We have already done some building, some character creating, and some truth setting, as well as a sector creation. We are playing in the Outer Drift, as you might have gleaned from the intro, and these are also episodes that are published. Just be aware that the very first one, the character creation and truth setting one, is not particularly good in the audio quality department, and none of them are required listening to follow the story, because everything we have determined and established there will also appear in the fiction. The rough format of this podcast is going to be very focused on the fiction, with some under-the-hood Starforged play interspersed in between the zooming in on the action and then fading back out on the mechanics level. So basically I'll knock out a quick paragraph of fiction before and after every die roll to flesh out the story and provide a more free-form rundown of the mechanics behind it in between. One last thing to do before we get going. Normally we would start by making our session moves to kick off, but since we're playing our inciting incident today, I'll keep it to setting a content flag for this session as part of the safety tools, stating that I'm happy not to outright exclude any topic, but I will definitely pan the narrative away from direct displays of the majority of negative isms that you can think of, and definitely draw the line at, or rather, well before, detailing excessive psychological or sexual violence. There, check in with self, that's important for solo play, and done. Now let's zoom back to the fiction and take another look at the Titan, and specifically at the lone passenger it has been carrying for the last 200 years. The Titan shows no sign of life, this behemoth suddenly manifesting among the floating space rock. The faintest glow of its gargantuan propulsion exhausts now fading rapidly, and an intermittent irregular pulse of light from its position indicators are the only giveaways that it is anything more than a cold, floating tomb. And yet there is still life contained in its confines, a living passenger, oblivious to the Titan's latest autonomous jump through the fabric of reality. Suspended in a medically induced stasis in a sealed capsule that bears no small likeness to a coffin, she takes no heed of the sudden shudders rippling through the ship as the first asteroid dismantles itself on the hull of the hulking Leviathan, and oblivious she continues her bicentennial comatose existence. The Titan, too, continues undisturbed and undiscovered, as it has been since the time of humanity's exodus. So now we know where we can find our protagonist, but she's not really doing much yet. We need to work out a way towards an inciting incident, and we've already determined in our setup episode that this will involve a well-connected scavenger named Creed O'Brien. So let's zoom into the fiction and see how Creed and his crew come into play here. I had some thoughts about that, especially in terms of the salvage scavenger background that Creed has. And what is the Titan if not a huge and juicy piece of salvage? But there was something more to Creed as well, because we've established that Creed is looking for something very specific, a very specific item. And that is something I want to tie into the fiction of why Creed is so keen on salvaging the Titan. So let's have a look. There is, as it happens, one witness to the Titan's arrival, a scavenger in a junkyard workshop on a blasted, desolate rock at the other end of the sector, whose head whips around to stare at the green glow of a spectrum display, part of a sensor array that routinely scans the periphery for a variety of signatures and has now started beeping as it comes to life, slowly, ever more rapidly, until its spectrum lines turn into jagged knives and peaks, and the sound becomes a monotonous shriek that picks up ever more intensity as the scavenger drops the device to cover his ears just in time for the spectrum reader to emit one final dissonant howl and explode. "Boss!" The scavenger half shouts, half coughs as he turns away from the smoldering, now useless hunk of circuitry and rushes off to find the man in charge. The man who'd been waiting for this day for decades, except not like this. None of this makes sense. Not this intensity, not this signal strength. Above my pay grade, the scavenger mutters as he stumbles off to find Creed O'Brien. So there we have the specifics of what Creed is looking for, and I derived this from this experimental FTL drive that we determined was the thing that allowed the ancestors of the Forge residents to escape the religious persecution in their home sector. And Creed is wanting to find remnants of a Mirage engine. He is scanning for signatures on scrap coming into the junkyard that he runs, and that's what this spectrum sensor was tuned to. But its scale was entirely unprepared for measuring an actual live jump from a Mirage engine, even if it was very far away in the sector. It just overloaded it, and so it blew up. I just imagine all of this to be quite jury-rigged as well. So the way this setting works, this retro sci-fi setting, a lot of this is also quite MacGyvered technology. But at least Creed now has an inkling that there is a Mirage engine out there somewhere, or at least something that definitely reads like a Mirage engine, and we imagine he is intrigued. So now we can assume that Creed grabs a bunch of salvagers, boards a ship, and makes haste to the coordinates that the signature originated from. And I imagine this is how they happen across Echo's stasis capsule. Probably in storage somewhere in a medical bay. We have decided Echo is a super soldier, an augmented super soldier, and I presume that she had some sort of mission that tied in with the purpose of the Titan. We don't know what any of this is about. This is Echo's background vow. She wants to find out what happened to the Titan, because in the end, the Titan as we find it now will be bereft of all its crew, who are gone without a trace, and the only living thing of its original occupants, that's not to say nothing is alive in there, but probably only things you wouldn't want to meet, is Echo. So Echo is the remnant, the echo, if you will, of the past. And the way I picture this is that Creed and his crew dock their salvager barge on the Titan, find a point of entry, and potentially one of the very first things they run into is this stasis capsule. And of course they scan it and they see that it's still active and that it's a container that is hiding something, so they are trying to open it, and this is where we can zoom back into the fiction. Echo Sedano is immediately torn from her stasis when the Tau implant, her tactical assistance overlay, triggers an adrenaline surge in her circulatory system that roughly jolts her awake. Her eyes fly open, myopic despite the dim twilight, and she instinctively flexes her muscles, a claustrophobic panic rising as she senses restraints and realizes she is unable to move. Her Tau responds with a moderate oxytocin protocol, pushing against the swell of anxiety. Pupils dilating, Echo relaxes and her consciousness reasserting itself takes stock. Projected across her cornea, a stark white flash of phosphorescent letters against the dim red glow illuminating the inside of her stasis capsule, the HUD of her augment repeats its cycle of silent alerts. Proximity protocol engaged. Anti-tamper measures deployed unsuccessfully. Capsule integrity about to be compromised. Somebody trying to break into what the tech grunts called her snooze box? A boarding action? Had the enemy somehow managed to catch up to the last fleet? She issues a thought command to her augment connected to the stasis capsule via the port in the back of her neck, causing the safety bindings holding her in place to slip open soundlessly. Her hands freed, she places a palm down on a smooth, cold sensor plate, feeling the mild electrostatic buzz as it scans and identification positive slides open. She pulls out a rebreather half mask and the suppressed lightweight needle pistol from the storage compartment, clamps the former across her face, readies the latter and rips back the pressure release latch to discharge the capsule lid. So in that piece there, I wanted to flesh out one thing specifically, and that is the TAO, the TAO, the Tactical Assistance Overlay, which is the augment that Echo has. This is one of her assets. And it is an augment that boosts her wits in certain situations. So it's effectively a heads-up display overlay inside of her eyes that's projecting itself across the lenses so she can read it. I'm not sure if I picture it having an actual voice. I think it's less invasive, but it's definitely very intrusive in being synced up to her circulatory system. So it tries to make Echo more effective by messing with her hormone balances if needed, which is definitely a rather staggeringly horrific concept to me, but I think this is something Echo, as a sort of gene-modded, augmented super soldier of days past, has never really known any other way. Like, to my mind, this has been the case all her life. I would imagine that these augmented soldiers will be almost bred for this, and that they grow up with their augment so it can literally become second nature to them. And so that is the augment in some of its functionalities. It provides tactical assistance, it provides small boosts, and the way this expresses itself is through a +1 on wits rolls wherever its tactical purpose is appropriate. So generally most tactical and combat scenarios, I would imagine. Now this is where the rolling starts, because I have left it open to a degree of who is out there right now trying to tamper with Echo's stasis capsule. I think it is likely that it's Creed and crew, but since we're playing a game here, and a game that likes to throw our fiction for a loop, maybe he's been followed, or someone got ahead of him here and also got a read on the signature, or just stumbled across it. So while I know that Creed is definitely on board, I only know that it's likely that it's him and his crew that are currently trying to open this stasis coffin. So let's ask the Oracle. On a roll of a 26 and above, it's Creed, and anything below, we'll have to figure out who that is. So here comes the roll. That's a 75, so it's Creed. And now the last thing Echo did in the fiction was to pressure release the latch to discharge the capsule lid, which I imagine has some additional functionalities potentially, if this is a sort of in case of emergency defense mechanism almost. But I mean, it's been a while since she's been in here, a couple of centuries longer than she probably expected. So maybe it's broken as well, which means I would like to see how Echo's surprise plays out by securing an advantage, because in this case we are in control, so we're not facing danger, and that can set us up for our next scene to see in what position we are. So I'm gonna roll, secure an advantage plus, Shadow? Wits? I think in the broadest sense this counts as trickery, so let's go with Shadow, which gives us a +2. And that's a strong hit, off to a good start. Which means we can choose whether we want to take +2 momentum or add +1 to our next move. Now I'm not sure what the next move is going to be. I can't really fully picture what she will do once she's out. Probably just point the gun at whatever is there and then take it from there. It also depends on Creed and his crew and their reaction. So I'm going to take the momentum instead. And our base starting momentum is +2, so that brings us up to +4. So now we know Echo has the element of surprise on her side, and we know that it's Creed and crew out there. So let's go and have a look at them. A precautionary feature of the anti-temper protocol, the pressure release of the capsule lid is rigged to coincide with an equally forceful shock expulsion emanating to all sides of the stasis coffin, a non-lethal but decidedly effective measure to provide a tactical advantage to the person on the inside. Echo pops up from her prone position and brings her gun around in a circle, spinning in a half crouch to take stock of her assailants, her Tau casting a luminous outline around every potential target and flashing risk assessments across her peripheral vision. 6 out of 7 noteworthy threats are currently writhing on the ground in a heaving pile of flailing bodies, their mixture of dirty jumpsuits and workers' boots decidedly not the enemy uniforms Echo expected to see. She notes the unfamiliar weapons scattered next to the groaning jumble as her Tau, unable to determine make or model of any of them, throws up a series of question marks. Echo settles the needle pistol on the one potential threat left standing, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a dark complexion, sun-beaten, weathered skin scarred by welts of plasma burns, and a bushy white beard sticking out from under a filter mask. His bright eyes surrounded by a web of wrinkles regarding her from the shadow of a broad-brimmed frontiersman's hat. The kindly, almost grandfatherly demeanor is somewhat cast into perspective by the oversized slug shotgun resting in the crook of his arm, but pointing for the moment away from Echo. He cocks an eyebrow and holds out a placating hand, his voice clear, rich and soothing as he speaks. "Well, now, no need for any of that here, is there? What's your name, friend?" We've established Creed to be charismatic and sort of a leader figure, and especially also since his rank to actually form a bond with him is extreme, which tells me it doesn't particularly faze him, and he probably has a pretty good read on this situation, so he tries to defuse it, and now we need to figure out how Echo will react to this. And we don't have a whole lot to go on, because we don't really have much of a fleshed out personality for her, beyond that for the majority of the life that she's led, we can infer that her duty was probably filling out her existence to close to 100%, but maybe we can give her a few character traits by using the oracles. Maybe that'll give us an idea on how she might end up reacting here, and it's also a nice way of bringing the oracles into play. So I want to do that. I'm basically going to treat Echo like an NPC we first meet and try to figure out what some cornerstones of her persona are. So we'll use the first look oracle here and roll twice on it. Here comes the first one. And we're starting off with a 99, which gives us youthful. So she appears young. Maybe that's a side effect of whatever modifications have been applied to her though, and she might in fact be a little bit older. That will affect her personality and reaction though, if she actually is quite young. So let's give it a 50-50 toss-up here. So anything up to 50 that we roll is that she is actually quite young, and anything above that is that she only looks that way. 82, she only appears youthful, so she is potentially a lot more mature than people give her credit for, at least on first look. I'll note that down on our character sheet as deceptively young looking, and we'll roll up our second first look feature, which gives us a 61, and that says poised. Now between those two, I'm getting a sort of a read of her that would tell me she will try to establish control of this situation, but she will be in control of herself and her reactions as well, so she will not just start blasting all of a sudden. So I think what she wants to do is to compel them to drop their weapons. At least probably compel Creed to drop his weapon, because his crew, having been knocked back by this electric pulse and sort of semi-tasered and thrown on the ground, have already dropped theirs. And the way she goes about this, I picture as not an immediate drop 'em or I'll blast your face off kind of plus iron move, but more like a command presence sort of move where she tries to establish this sort of my instructions shall not be met with resistance kind of tone of voice. So I'll roll this with plus heart. And I'm rolling a 6 when I'm only getting a weak hit out of it. I say only, but that's actually pretty good. That gives us another +1 momentum, putting us up to +5. But their agreement and compliance comes with a demand or a complication. Envision their counter offer. Now I wonder whether this complication could also be an external factor that we can throw in to galvanize the plot here a little bit and give them something to work towards together. Maybe they have been followed or something. And since from Creed's perspective, this is effectively a derelict, like a Delph site to explore, I think we can just look for complications on the peril oracle in the derelicts, specifically the medical section oracle on that set of tables, just to give us an idea of maybe some external factor that comes into play, because otherwise we're going to have this like back and forth to like drop your weapon, no, you drop yours, no, we'll drop it together, 3, 2, 1. It doesn't really play out that way in my head, so I'd like to throw in something to incite a bit of more action. So let's see. We'll roll on the medical oracle for the derelict, medical section oracle that is, and getting a 28 erratic medical bots. Okay, well, I guess they were alerted by Echo waking up and are a bit confused after 200 years of inactivity. That's kind of hilarious. We'll have the misguided, data corrupted medical bot coming in, maybe trying to be of use to the sole patient that it has by removing her spleen or something. So we'll see what happens. But I think Creed will be compliant, but something else will happen. So let's zoom back into the fiction. Drop it and move, Echo says, gesturing for the man to step over to his comrades who are now unsteadily untangling themselves and clambering to their feet. The rest of you get up. 5 steps back. The Tau threat assessment dims the outlines to yellow as her orders are met with compliance, even though she finds herself momentarily irritated by the persistent creases around the eyes of the old man. Is he grinning at her under his half-mask? She keeps her attention on him as the group shuffles into position a safe distance away from their dropped weapons. They look on second glance less like an invading force and more like a shabbily dressed maintenance crew armed to go up against a particularly feisty set of extraterrestrial rodents. This is a military vessel, Echo says. How did you get in here? She hears the sound of pressure doors opening before anyone has a chance to answer, the Tau instantly flooding her peripheral vision with threat indicators encroaching on her from behind. The old man raises both eyebrows, his focus of attention fixed above and beyond Echo's shoulder. Oldest trick in the book, I know, he says. Just happens there really is company coming. Echo keeps the gun trained on him as she half turns far enough to give her Tau a better look at the approaching danger. Medical drone designation Katagawa 3 inbound. Data corruption detected. Behavior matrix prediction unstable. Engagement protocol disassembly recommended. Echo feels her adrenaline surge without external prompting from the Tau this time as she considers her situation. Outnumbered to her left and armed with a needle pistol, ineffective against the machine threat encroaching from the right, she weighs her options. So what do we do now? Because I felt like making it a needle pistol would sort of be appropriate as a thing against, humanoid incursions, but now we got a robot, and that just probably plinks off the metal frame of that thing. I feel like we could maybe get away with giving Echo a better weapon, but she also has to roll, metaphorically, the dice on Creed and company a little. So does she turn her back on them and dive back to her coffin where Maybe some more weaponry might be stashed, considering she was out on some kind of mission here. She probably has like a compartment underneath where she was actually resting that contains a lot more of her personal effects and the rest of her gear. Fortunately, there's a move for that as well. We can check our gear and see. And considering the read that Echo has gotten so far on Creed particularly, maybe she does, I wouldn't say trust, but she's under the impression that he's not gonna shoot her in the back if she darts to get another weapon and take care of the robot. So let's check our gear and see. This is a roll plus supply, and our supply is currently maxed. So that's a +5. And we do get a strong hit. So we have the item and we're ready to act. We take another +1 momentum, putting us up to +6. Okay, so we imagine there's another compartment underneath the stasis capsule that houses Echo's more sizable weapons, and that she dives for that as she goes for the robot. Which means we also would have to enter the fray here, but first we have to decide what this robot is in terms of difficulty and challenge rating. And considering we expect Creed and company to join Echo's side here, well, is that likely to happen? I think that's likely to happen, so let's roll up quickly. 26 and plus, Creed and crew are helping her. 71, yeah, okay. So that's a malfunctioning medical bot, probably on its own right a formidable foe, but with the amount of firepower that Creed brings and Echo thrown in the mix, that probably just makes it troublesome. Just easily dispatched, it's more of a trust fall exercise than a real combat encounter anyway, right? And so we enter the fray, and in this case I would like to enter it with wits, also getting the +1 from our Tau augment here, because we are in sort of a trap-like scenario between a rock and a hard place and sizing up the situation. So we'll roll our 1 wits and our +1 from our augment and see what we get. Okay, we get a weak hit, which means we have options to take even more momentum or put ourselves into control, into the in control status in the following combat encounter, which means we get first strike. And I think I'm going to go for that because, we have built a sizable amount of momentum already, and the fiction also seems to indicate that we are dashing for the weapon, readying it, and start blasting. So let's get back to the fiction. The Tau's threat level outline around the unstable drone turns crimson as it draws near, its octopus-like limbs studded with surgical tools, saws and needlers, the globular body wobbling as it floats drunkenly, its anti-grav propulsor apparently having seen better days. Echo launches herself at her stasis capsule, putting it between herself and the erratic robot, and swipes a hand over a sensor panel set into the foot of the medical coffin. She senses movements to her left, threat matrix turning from yellow to orange as the old man's strange crewmates rearm themselves, but she ignores them and does likewise, pulling a coil gun from the stash, the design of the Gauss rifle resembling a conventional slug machine pistol in both visual design and fire rate, and bringing it up to release a burst of high-velocity projectiles at the malfunctioning automaton. So we're in control and we fire a salvo. That's a strike. There's kind of no two ways about that one. Now that's an interesting note also to a change in the combat mechanics here versus Ironsworn, which means this robot, if we do actually hit it, is already partly wrecked, since if we use the strike move, we can actually mark progress twice, and on a troublesome foe that fills up 6 boxes already. And that is because now the gain ground mechanic, which is the combat equivalent of secure an advantage, also gives you an option to mark a single progress if you score a hit there. So you have the sort of repositioning or securing an advantage move, also allowing you to mark progress, while the attack move, the singular focused deal some damage move, lets you mark progress twice, which is also why the default of the enemy difficulty suggestion went up to formidable instead of dangerous as it was in Ironsworn. But this is a change I really like. It gives you a lot more options to play around with setup moves, since on a mechanical level, if you think about it as sort of a DPS race, you'd be kind of lured into striking a lot of the time in the past, but now you can actually use the gain ground move to also make some progress, which is fantastic. So let's strike and see where that gets us. We use edge since we are firing with our Gauss machine rifle here. And we get a weak hit, which means that we can indeed mark progress twice, bringing us instantly up to 6 progress markers, but we expose ourselves to danger and are no longer in control. We are instead in a bad spot. So let's take a peek at the fiction to see what that looks like. The coil gun fires accelerated projectiles with a higher penetrative velocity, the friction of impact causing a line of bright sparks to zigzag across the curved outer plating of the medical drone. The acrid smell of singed compound fills the air as Echo immediately repositions to the far side of the capsule, the drone careening momentarily off course in the opposite direction. She tenses in anticipation of a rain of fire from behind, bracing herself for a costly betrayal by the old man and his crew that never comes. Instead, a heavy blast rings out, deafening the slugger projectile fired from the crew chief's oversized shotgun, slamming into the drone, sending a billow of black caustic smoke up, and propelling the drone once more back towards Echo, who swears under her breath, caught out of position and with a shot from the drone's wildly swinging cauterizing laser barely missing her face. Sounds like a bad spot to me, so we have a different set of options now that we are in a bad spot, and that's a different set of moves compared to when we're in control. We could clash, trading blows sort of thing, which would enable us to mark progress, but also very likely keep us in a bad spot, which wouldn't be ideal if we mark progress, because then we can't really still end the fight. So we should endeavor to regain control, which means we can react under fire, which I think is more appropriately now that Echo realizes Creed's crew is on her side and she can maneuver a bit more freely. So let's react under fire with edge as we reposition to get to better cover and away from this Freddy Krueger automaton. And that's a strong hit. Nice. We regain control and take +1 momentum. +7 now. And back to the fiction. The drone rotates like a maddened spinning top, its arms a blur of motion as it hovers out of control, trying to find an effective response in its faulty coding that matches the incoming volume of fire from all sides. Evading another stray laser burst and throwing herself over a medical examination table, Echo presses her shoulder against the edge of the backrest from below, flipping it over and taking cover behind the hefty piece of furniture as she lines up another burst of fire. That sounds like a strike again, so let's resolve that and see if we can end the fight right after, because then we're really far in with progress. And that's a strong hit, so that actually puts us technically over the maximum progress, so our bar is filled all the way up to 10, which means I'll immediately roll to make the take decisive action move and combine those two in the fiction. So unless we roll double zeros now, we're good and we're ending the fight, but I've rolled that many times before, so let's see how that one goes. We get a strong hit, so we take +1 momentum and the robot is a goner. And our momentum is +8. Catching another series of hits from Echo's coil gun, the drone jolts away from the stasis capsule and towards the old man's crew, saw blades screaming and still revolving rapidly, taking several more blasts along the way and striking one of the workers a glancing blow on the arm, but accomplishing little more than a tear in the jumpsuit before the scar-faced oldtimer releases a double-barreled salvo at point-blank range that sends it flying into a corner of the medical bay, its anti-grav propulsion defunct, circuits burning. The drone's many appendages spasm and curl up like the limbs of a dead spider, and it comes to a halt, destroyed. "Well," the old man says without missing a beat, "I didn't quite catch your name the first time round. I'm Creed." He lowers his slugger and extends a hand in Echo's general direction. So there's Creed, now we've met him, and I don't think we really need a move to determine what happens next, but I did zoom out of the fiction because we need to consider the situation from Echo's perspective to work out how she responds and where to go from here. She's been under for a long time, but she's not really aware how much time has passed. These Mirage drives that the Exodus fleet was built on were not generational ships. It didn't take decades or centuries to travel to the Forge. They were experimental technology that also had some hefty repercussions in form of this sundering, the softening of the walls of reality that is part of our truths. But I think from Echo's perspective, she's expected this to be a stasis for maybe a couple of months at most. And now it's, 2 centuries later, but initially exposed to a hectic situation that is calming down now, she now probably has some time to notice this and to ask herself a few questions, because she has that Tau augment overlay that also tells her, we assume, the time and date. So maybe this is when she notices that it's not been however many days, weeks, or months that she expected to be under, but more like 2 centuries. So maybe we actually do make a move here and endure stress, because, how would I react if I were confronted with that scenario? That probably stressed me out quite a bit. And by quite a bit, we have to categorize for endure stress. Is it major stress, serious stress, or minor stress? I would unfortunately call this major stress, because that's just my read of the scale of the situation. So down 3 spirit we go. I know the rules say that we are frequently as players too hard on our characters, but I think this really is a monumental stress factor. So I really call this major, and that means we roll with a +2, which is the current score for both our spirit and our heart. So let's see how Echo will handle this revelation. Okay, we succeed with a strong hit, so we go back up to +3 spirit, which is nice. Well, kind of. And we go back to Echo's response to Creed, again asking her name. Echo, she says, lowering her weapon and walking over to shake with Creed. Thanks for the assist. The two of them stand facing each other a little off to the side from the huddle of Creed's crew that now rallies around its injured member and pays little attention to their meetup. Don't mention it. You are feeling a little nip in the air in that getup? Echo, having spent her time in stasis in her standard issue light grey flex weave undershirt and shorts, doesn't feel particularly self-conscious about it, but does indeed sense the cold in the climatized room around her. So she snorts in amusement and pulls a loose-fitting jumpsuit from the gear compartment and over herself. Creed studies the insignia on her upper arm and chest intently as she zips herself in. Orc's back. Heard about that crew. There's a hint of wonder in his voice. Bunch of gene mods, implants, that sort of thing. Pre-Exodus-like. Damn. He gives Echo a long, thoughtful once-over. You one of them? How long have you been in that thing? Echo's mouth opens, but before she can respond and ask him what he's talking about, her brain catches up and she notes the time and date displayed on her Tau's cornea overlay. The Tau sync to her circulatory system floods her with another dose of oxytocin as her panic levels spike. 200 years. 2 centuries. Hey, whoa, you gone damn pale and wobbly all of a sudden. You okay? Creed reaches out a hand to steady her, but Echo takes a couple of steps back and turns away from him, shaking her head and lifting her hands up, trying to calm herself. Mission parameters, she thinks, issuing a prompt to her Tau. Mission parameters expired. The answer flashes across her vision in uncompromising letters. Access denied. She turns back to face Creed, straining to keep the uncertainty out of her voice as she answers. She takes off her rebreather mask and forces a smirk. I'm afraid that's classified. The old man lowers his own half-face filter in return and grins at her. What, whether you okay? That's classified? Well, you don't look so okay, so anything I can do, you say the word. And I think with that meetup and making common cause, that's a good spot to zoom out for now and end the session, at least as far as the fiction is concerned. Let's wrap up by reflecting on what the first vow could be that we swear to Creed. Since we are still in our inciting incident setup, we know Creed is here to lay a hand on the Mirage drive, so is it even still functional? We don't know, but it might be a good, formidable vow to assist him in reaching it, so examining it, salvaging it, whatever he wants to do. And in turn, we can also maybe reach our ship, the Ghost, that's still somewhere here on the Titan, and maybe make some first progress on our own background vow, which is to find out what happened on the Titan. So let's maybe make that our vow. We vow to assist Creed in helping reach the engine section, the Mirage drive. So we'll kick off the next session by actually making the Swear an Iron Vow move, and we'll do some derelict exploration on the Titan. Sounds like fun. But I feel like while we're zoomed out, there's also a conversation happening as Creed briefly fills Echo in on who he is and what the Forge is, at least in broad strokes, and she comes to terms with her new situation. and overcomes the initial shock. So when we pick up next in the fiction, we can assume that that conversation has happened. So they've gotten that little setup, our truths and the high level stuff out of the way. Echo has gotten her bearings a little, and while she's still reeling on an emotional level, she's also caught up in a purpose now. She can be a scout, be a guide, and that is probably what she's been doing all along. So that gives us some security. So we can go back into the middle of the action next time when we start. And we start by swearing that iron vow. But that is next time. For now, we are done for today. Thanks for tuning in, and see you then.